Welcome to Passero's. I'm Java Jeff, and I'm so excited to bring you along on this coffee adventure where we're going to do a step-by-step process on doing a blind coffee tasting right from your own home. So hang on, have a lot of fun. Hit pause if you need to catch up, or if you need a little more time when we're sampling, no problem. I will not take it personally. But today, my objective is to get you a little further into coffee flavors. When you do a cupping side by side, especially blind, you're really focused on trying to come up with the differences. And when you put them side by side, you're all of a sudden able to see some of the differences. So exciting. I love this. I hope you enjoy this little journey we're about ready to start on. With your packet, you got a pre-checklist. Hopefully you've followed through that and you're already set up. If not, hit pause. I won't take it personally, and catch up. Once you've got the thing set up, you should have 5 cups or mugs, 3 similar size for your ground coffee, 1 with some water in it, and the other where we're going to put the spent grinds after we've brewed our coffee. And you need 3 big sort of like soup spoons. It's best. You need 1 for slurping for our tasting, the other 2 to help take off the grind. So set up and let's get going. The first thing we're going to do is, as you all got with your packet, you got this flavor wheel. We've simplified it. I'm going to explain a little later as we get going. And then on the back side, you've got the tasting guide. Now the tasting guide is broken into 6 different categories. Initially, when you're going through this, you might not be able to fill in or understand, but as we go through today, and maybe if you do it again next time, you're going to come up with some great flavors that you're going to enjoy. So let's get going. Okay, so now we're going to add our hot water. Basically, if you boil some water and allow it about 2 minutes to cool down, you don't want to add boiling water to your grinds, but you need to have it really very, very hot. So what you're going to do is slowly pour it in each. You're putting about 8 ounces in. You want to pour it over the grind so it really makes sure that all the grinds are nice and wet. So pour away. Get them all moving around in the cup. You might start to get some great flavors coming out. And you want to start your 4-minute timer now, because that's how long our brew cycle is. Most coffee brews for about 4 minutes. This type of a cupping, which is a standard in the industry, is what's known as immersion brewing. It allows the hot water and the coffee beans to hang out with each other for the entire brewing time. French press is one of my favorites at home. Is another example of immersion brewing. Most people are using what would be considered a filter, using paper filter primarily. Certainly a pour over uses a filter. The type we use in our cafes also use filters. The immersion will give you more body in your coffee. More of the coffee oils get through. There's nothing in the way of the filter that's trapping those. So oftentimes when you're doing immersion brewing, you're getting a fuller, it tastes like a fuller cup of coffee versus a filter. And the third way of brewing is espresso, which uses pressure in hot water. And so you come up with a whole different type of a brewing method there. We're going to let these brew for that 4-minute period. And while we do that, I want to kind of explain some of the flavors we're going to start looking for. As you have on your flavor wheel, there's 6 categories that we're going to look for and try to taste. The first one is nuts. Hazelnut, walnut, you'll get some of those flavors oftentimes. Sweet fruit, that's really strawberry, sometimes raspberry, definitely sometimes blueberry. You also have sugar and sweet section. That's really looking for caramel, honey, sometimes a little maple possibly. The chocolate section, always somewhat dominant in a lot of these coffees. You get bittersweet chocolate, you're going to get milk chocolate and dark chocolate, some great tones there with wonderful coffees. The herbal spice section is oftentimes you might get a little peppery, a little cinnamon. Certainly cedar is a good definition for some coffees, sort of a woody taste, I almost call it at times. And then the bright fruits, those are going to be more like lemon, lime, tangerine. So as we go through this, and as you do it at home, take your time, sip, see what you end up coming up with. On the other side, we have the tasting guide. There are 6 categories here. The first one's going to be aroma or smell. You can smell it when it's dry. You get more of a release when it's wet. When we take the top off, or the grinds off the top at the end of our 4-minute brewing period, I'm going to have a smell and see what we come up with. And you can smell the difference between the 3 different coffees. As we go through this and as you do it at home, if you can't tell any difference initially, don't kick yourself. If somebody can and you can't, don't kick yourself. Everybody's palate is different. And the idea here is to have fun, is to learn and to slowly cultivate a more sophisticated palate so you're really able to start tasting some of these tonal differences in the coffees. The third category is roast. We've all been certainly to Starbucks, and oftentimes we'll taste their darker roasted coffee. The dominant flavor there is always going to be kind of that smoky, burnt taste. So that's a dark roast. Most everything at Passero's is going to be a light medium, a medium dark. We have very, very few coffees that have that smoky taste. Really, our roaster Frank, who's normally roasting behind me, does a great job of bringing out the individual flavors in each of the coffees. The idea is trying to bring the sweetness out so you can really taste the difference, and you will here. Body, that's really a mouthfeel. That's sort of the difference between white wine, light-bodied, red wine, more of a heavy, fuller body. So that's a good way to look at body. Acidity, that's really that brightness, that fruit, that lemon, high tones. That's acidity that's very natural in coffee, and that we all taste in different coffees, and some of them is going to have more and less. And then the aftertaste, really how long does that coffee linger in your mouth? Does it fill up your whole mouth, or does it just kind of evaporate very, very quickly after you've taken your gulp? So those are some of the ways of looking at these terms. And again, no wrong answers, just fill them in as you go through this. We're going to do 2 passes on our cupping. The first one, we're going to let the coffee cool just a little bit. We're just about ready to pull this off now. Actually, we are. So what you want to do is, hopefully you have 3 spoons. One's going to be for cupping, and these 2 spoons, tablespoons are really great, are going to be for taking the crust off. So basically I'm going to just take it like this, around the edge, up and out. And what you're really trying to do not stir the cup. You're going to agitate a little bit, but what you don't want to do is go and get all those grinds on the bottom floating back up, or you're going to get them all in your teeth. You'll get a little of that no matter what. So just take your time, pull off some of those grinds. A lot of them we're going to sink down. We're going to do the next one. Take your time, put me on pause if you need to get this done, because you don't want too many grinds up on top. There we go. Once you're done, you can just put this aside. You're not going to need it anymore. You're going to notice, obviously, as we added the hot water initially at the beginning of the brew, you actually saw the coffee kind of foam up. That's called a bloom. And because coffee's fresh, that's gases that are escaping once and interacting with the hot water. If you're ever brewing, and you can look at the filter in your little Mr. Coffee, or obviously if you're doing pour over, if you do not see that bloom, the coffee is stale. It's old. The gases have already escaped, and you're not going to get a lot of those wonderful nuances that should be in your cup of coffee. The other thing to look for when you're buying coffee is size of the bean. The bigger, oftentimes better, but more importantly is consistency. All the beans that you buy of one type, unless it's of course a blend, it should be similar in size. There shouldn't be broken ones or cracked ones or different sized ones. If you're seeing small beans and large beans, the quality of the coffee is not as high. Just think about it when you're roasting or baking a small cookie versus a big cookie. The big cookie takes a lot longer to roast up or to bake. Same idea with coffee beans. If it's a small bean roasting next to a large bean, one's going to get overdeveloped, the other one's going to get possibly underdeveloped, and so you're going to end up with an inconsistent cup. So size of beans, consistency of bean, consistency of color in its roast, across the different beans when you're buying. Those are things to look for when you're buying coffee. So let's take a smell. So we've kind of, smells like coffee, right? See what you can come up with. See if you can smell the difference. Aroma is one of the hardest beginning steps for a beginning cupper. And if they all smell exactly the same, don't worry about it. Again, that's the difficulty. If you can smell some sweetness difference, fabulous. You're able to note that. Write it down on your little flavor guide here. We're going to let this cool, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some of our coffees. So as you probably know, Passero's mainly does organic and fair trade coffees, and I want to tell you why. Organic coffees mean that they have not used any pesticides and or synthetic fertilizers. The reason that's important is because we don't want them polluting the farm. The reality is if you're buying coffee and it's not organic, it's not going to involve your cup whatsoever. You're not going to get any pesticides, but you got to think about the farmer. For us, for a roaster, for a coffee company, we want them to have very, very clean soil for generations. We want them passing this down to their kids and grandkids and keeping the tradition alive. Coffee is produced way out. It's always going to be on the side of mountains, very, very high elevation. Coffee is grown basically along the equator around the earth. It cannot handle any frost, and it always is grown way out in the middle of nowhere. One of the great parts of coffee is it's the second largest traded commodity in the world after oil, which means that the richest countries of the world consume the highest quality, and the poorest countries oftentimes are the producers of coffee. So you're getting this great distribution of wealth from rich countries to poorer countries. And so supporting fair trade also is a certification that means that the farmer is going to end up getting a minimum amount per pound. So if the coffee market is down, and currently it is down, they are getting a basic price so they can consistently keep their farm alive, stay in business, continue to prune and take care of the trees, and they don't have to abandon things when the coffee prices are down. So both of those certifications are really important for us here at Passero's, and the premium is really not that much. So I'd certainly, wherever you're buying your coffee, and hopefully it's at Passero's, but as you experiment with other people, try to go with organics. I think it's a great way. You don't want that coffee polluting the local rivers and the soil. So those are the basic certifications we use in almost all of our coffees. We're going to let this cool a little more, and what I want to talk to you about is how coffee is processed. Coffee is a fruit. It's the seed or the inside that red berry. A red coffee berry is ripe, and we've got to get to that bean inside. So you're going to go out there and they're going to pull off all of the red berries, bring them back. The first thing they do is they go in water, oftentimes for a couple days, so they can ferment a little bit and the outer skin starts to rip away. There are two basic methods of drying coffee. The first is what's called the dry method, or the natural. This is the way it was done for many, many hundreds of years before diesel engine allowed us to go to the wet way. The dry way, basically after the coffee's been washed and fermented just a tad, it goes out on these large cement patios and dries out there. The danger and the difficulty of the dry method is the moisture that's still wrapped around that bean can rot, can ferment, can change the flavor of the bean, and so it's more labor intensive. They've got to turn over the bean quite often in the sun where it's drying, and so a lot of people, in fact, 80 to 90% of all coffee is done with the wet process. But let me finish with the dry. The beauty of the dry process is because that fruit and that skin is drying on the bean, it impairs some fabulous fruit flavors into the bean. So if you're ever seeing any of our coffees say natural or honey, that means it's been dried with some of the skin and the fruit on there, so it's going to have a much more fruit-forward flavor profile. The wet way uses machinery, mainly diesel engines, and because coffee beans in the fruit are really, they're seeds, they're pretty hard. They are able to send them through these sifters, which literally squashes the fruit and the skin away from the beans. So they get tossed through these screens and they're just ripping off the fruit. They end up with the beans. They're pretty darn clean at that point. They go out also on the patios where they're continually moved and dried there as well. So those are the two basics. There's some in-betweens, but dry and wet are the two major ways of processing. Let's get some tasting here. So get your taster. I'm going to grab a napkin because I do a little bit of a mess when I'm slurping, and I really want you to slurp. Make noise. The idea is you want that flavor, you want the coffee going all over your mouth, all over your tongue, because you have different taste receptors all over, and you want to kind of figure out what's coming in. And again, we're going to do this twice, but the first time it's a little warm, so watch yourself, don't hurt yourself, and just slurp it. I oftentimes will close my eyes. We're very visual creatures. We take in a lot of our cues through our eyes. If you close your eyes, you're going to bring up your sense of smell and your sense of taste. So I oftentimes when I'm slurping, I will literally close my eyes to see what I come up with. So let's do a couple of this first A. So think about body. Is it light, medium, full-bodied? Are you getting any flavor tones? Are you getting any chocolate tones? It's going to be a lot easier as you're doing these side by side. So your first couple sips, you're going, tastes like coffee, which is true. So let's go to the second one, B. So right away I can tell and taste the difference. If you can't, or which is fine, again, no wrong answers here, go back to the A, and then go to B. And you hopefully can taste a little difference. Oftentimes I'll describe the difference on where I'm tasting it in my mouth. So you can grab your flavor guide, your tasting guide, and start writing down some notes. Put me on pause anytime you want, I won't take it personally, to catch up and take your time with this. I'm gonna kind of run through it, but I want you to slow it down in your kitchen. Enjoy this. Hopefully you might have someone with you. It's a lot of fun to do with two people. Again, no wrong answers. What I like and what I taste isn't gonna be what you taste. Because we all have different palates. We all have different physiologies. So let's go, I'm gonna go back to B. Good slurp, clean my spoon, back to C. Back to C again. So write down some of your notes, what you're tasting. Can you tell the difference between A, B, and C? Well, if you can't very much, the next time we do this in a couple minutes, when it cools down, you're gonna get more distinct flavors. The reality is coffee, as well as any other liquid, when it reaches your body temperature right around 100 degrees, more of the flavors come out. I think we've all got a real chilled, cheap white wine, and the first couple sips it's pretty good, but as it warms up, you're like, oh, what happened to this? And that's because those natural flavors are starting to come out as the liquid reaches your body temperature. Same thing with coffee. When it's hot, you're not getting as many of the flavors. So you set your cup of coffee down and you come back to it, and if you're drinking it and you're getting some flavors you don't like, it might not be the best cup of coffee. With hopefully any specialty coffee, with any Passero coffee, I love it when it gets to room temperature, because that's where all the flavors come out, and they really are easy to tell. So showing off there just a little bit. So write down some of your thoughts, and we're going to now talk just a bit more about coffee. So let me talk a little bit about roasting. Behind me is our roaster, Lucille, we call her. Frank is our master roaster, and he is amazing. Whenever he gets a new bag in, and coffee is seasonal, we could get the exact same bag from the same farm, from the same process method, from the same field, and it's going to taste different year in and year out. A lot of the basic flavors are going to be the same, but there are going to be nuanced difference, and that has to do with how much rainfall occurred that year, you know, what the weather was like that year. And so there are those variables that literally do change the way a coffee tastes from year to year. So very much like wine, you know, unfortunately, sometimes my favorite coffees are not the same the next year. But overall, about 80% of a lot of the basic flavors are going to be consistent when we're buying from the exact same farm. And coffee is grown way out in the middle of nowhere, villages along the side of mountains, dirt roads, further from any other places to grow things. You might get some bananas there, but it's not going to be a massive farm overall. Most of our coffees come from small farm owners, very, very few acres at the very most. Some of them a little more, but really not much in the way of commercial large farm sets up. So roasting basically deals with temperature and time as well as airflow. And what Frank is trying to do, it's computerized from a guide, but he's doing all of the adjustment of airflow and temperature drop manually. And so he's able to come up with a way, and literally there's this graph because we start close to 400 degrees when we're dropping the coffee beans in. Very quickly that roasting goes down because of the inside the drum cools off because we're putting cooler beans in it, and then slowly starts turning up, and as it develops you get different phases that a good roaster is looking for. What Frank tries to do is come up with a profile that brings out these natural flavors, and once he hits that, the idea is to repeat it with that same bean week in, and month out. All right, so now the coffee's cooled just a little more. Hopefully it's closer to our temperature. And this time around, when we're tasting, you're gonna taste some tastes, I believe, that you didn't get the first time. So once again, let's get slurping and see what we come up with. I'm getting a more flavored profile. Getting this on the tip of my tongue. I'm not gonna give away anything. At the end of the video, I'm going to tell you exactly what coffees came in your 3 bags, A, B, C. You had 3 sets of labels that came with it, and I'll tell you which ones they are, and I'll give you kind of my overview on the coffee, but not yet. But as you go through these, write down whatever comes to mind. There's no wrong answers. So yeah, very different with these two. The body is fuller on this one. For those who know me, they know I love coffee. This is one of my favorite things to do. I'm so lucky every day I get to drink outstanding coffees, and I hope you join me on this journey. So, if you're still tasting, which is great, put me on pause, because I'm going to now tell you what is in each of the bags. All right? So, you had your 3 labels. So coffee A is an organic, fair trade Mexican from the Oaxaca region. One of the best Mexicans I've had in a while. And the reason I say that is because it's a real clear cup, or clean cup, we oftentimes refer to it. It's not muddy. Oftentimes you'll get that in a Mexican coffee. This one, to me, has this wonderful lemon tone in it. Try it again. See if you can taste that lemon at the end. It's on the tip of your tongue, at least for me it was. Number 2 is an Indonesian from the beautiful island of Bali. It's called Blue Moon. It's a natural process. We talked about that. It was dried with the berry on it. You're going to taste a little bit of chocolate, a real nice smoothness through this coffee. Beautiful coffee, one of my very, very favorites. And I get a nice plum finish kind of back in here when I'm tasting this coffee. And as it cools, a lot of that flavor really comes up with. Lastly is another Indonesian, and this is from the island of Sulawesi. It's also an organic coffee. I'm getting chocolate tones. You're not really getting any of the juicy plum or the lemon. You're just getting this nice, smooth, great cup of coffee for after dinner, great cup of coffee with food, because it can hold up, because it's more full body. It lingers a little longer. A wonderful coffee. All three are some of my favorites. Every 2 months, we come up with a different set of three. So join me come springtime when we do the next. This is our winter 2020 blends. So I hope you had a great time. Do it again. Let's hit this all and do it again tomorrow morning or whenever. Bring a friend along, do it side by side, have fun with this. No wrong answers. The whole idea is to discover what flavors you're tasting. So thanks for the journey. I hope you had a lot of fun.